This week's parsha is the most important parsha in the entire Torah. You may ask, why is this week's parsha the most important in the entire Torah? Well, let me tell you. Parashah Achrei Mot moves away from the discussion of Tzarad and circles back to an event from a few weeks ago, the death of Aaron's two sons. Hashem warns Moshe and Aaron against unauthorized entry into the most holy place and puts strict conditions on who can enter the innermost chamber of the Mishkan and when they're allowed to enter it. We read about the details of the Yom Kippur service and the origin of the term of scapegoat. We learn that we are not to bring offerings anywhere other than the Mishkan. We see the restrictions on consuming blood and the details of the forbidden sexual relationships. But none of that is why this is the most important parsha in the Torah. The reason this is the most important parsha is because it provides some insight into the difference between the sacred and the mundane. Every week after Shabbat and after every holiday, we make Havdalah, marking the end of sacred time and moving back to the mundane weekday. The Havdalah ritual is simple, beautiful, and meaningful. It has long been a favorite in our home. Along with the wine, candles, spices, and beautiful tune, the core blessing we make is Hamavdil ben Kodesh lachol, thanking Hashem for separating between the sacred and the mundane. This concept of sacred and mundane is infused in Jewish thought, but maybe separation between sacred and mundane is the wrong way of looking at it. Perhaps, at least according to the Sfas Emes, the Kodesh and Chol aren't as separate as we sometimes think they are. Before we unpack the Sfas Emes, what does this have to do with this week's parsha? In chapter 18, verse 3, we read, "You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or the land of Canaan to which I am taking you, nor shall you follow their laws." This seems pretty straightforward. Egypt and Canaan are full of idol worship, sexual immorality, and more. Being told to keep away from that seems reasonably logical. But let's read a bit further. The very next verse, verse 4, says, "My rules alone shall you observe." We generally view practices, laws, and actions as falling into one of two buckets, the sacred and the mundane, Kodesh and Chol. There are holy actions of prayer, learning Torah, lighting Shabbat candles, and then there are mundane actions like going to the market, walking your dog, or earning a living. Of course, we shouldn't copy the sacred practices of Egypt and Canaan. But verse 3 and 4 don't only tell us not to copy the sacred practices. It says not to copy any of their practices or laws. My rules alone shall you observe. We understand why we can't copy sacred practices, but why can't we copy mundane practices? Why can't we adopt their cuisine or style of dress or the way they walk their dog or the way they earn a living? What could be wrong with copying their mundane practices? This is where the Sfas Emes comes in. In his worldview, a decidedly Kabbalistic one, the Sfas Emes rejects the idea that there is a firm separation between Kodesh and Chol, between sacred and mundane. According to the Sfas Emes, there is no mundane. Everything is holy. If Hashem created the world, then everything in the world is from Hashem. And if everything in the world is from Hashem, then every action, every practice must have a spark of holiness in it. Sure, sometimes that holiness jumps out at us. Those are the things we usually call sacred. But other times, for the things we call mundane, that holiness is a little more concealed. But that just means we have to work a little harder to bring that holiness out. According to the Sfas Emes, there are two ways to do any seemingly mundane activity. There is the way of Egypt or of Canaan, where the holiness remains hidden, locked inside that action. And there's the way Hashem instructs us, that unlocks the holiness and brings it into the world. We can eat the Egyptian way and leave the holiness hidden, or we can eat the Jewish way and connect with that holiness. We can earn a living the Canaanite way and miss the opportunity to connect to Hashem, or we can elevate the way we conduct business and make it holy. It's not that the mundane practices of Egypt and Canaan are bad, but they represent a missed opportunity. And why would we want to miss an opportunity? According to the Sfas Emes, we should always be looking for opportunities to elevate the ordinary and make it holy. If we start to do that, we'll start seeing the Kodesh in everything, and we can transform our entire lives from Chol to Kodesh, from mundane to sacred. That's one reason why this is the most important parsha in the entire Torah. But the other reason is that the most important piece of Torah is whatever piece of Torah you have in front of you right now. Shabbat Shalom and Am Yisroel Chai.